This is the London that could have been Paris after the Great Fire of 1666. This is the plan that within 5 days of the end of the Great Fire, Sir Christopher Wren had created for a new London, rational, logical, geometrical, sweeping away the old historic medieval street plan. And it was even approved by King Charles II himself. As you can read here, it says, a plan for rebuilding the city of London after the Great Fire in 1666, designed by that great architect Sir Christopher Wren and approved by the King and Parliament, but unhappily defeated by faction. So what happened? Okay, so no sooner had the fire burnt down than people were out with their pegs and bits of string trying to mark out where their houses had been. But unfortunately, there was no trace. In most cases, even the deeds had been blown up or exploded by the flames. And so, despite the fact that not only Christopher Wren designed this plan, but other people like Hooke and Evelyn had their own plans, it couldn't happen. It wasn't really defeated by faction. It was more defeated by people squabbling. And in fact, they had to get these fire judges, 22 of them, to sit for months on end without pay, in order to make quick decisions about who would be allowed to build their houses back again where. But this sadly meant that Christopher Wren didn't manage to create his new rational modern London. However, he did in fact have a massive influence on London because he created his own London skyline. Look at this original. This is like less than 100 years later. You can see what London looked like here. Every single one of these is a Christopher Wren or one by Hawksmoor Church, including St Paul's Cathedral here as well. All of them completely distinct. Look how separately different his steeples and towers were. That was his unique genius. And look, you can even see the heads on the end of London Bridge. He really then created a new London that lasted in this form really until the beginning of the 20th century, when the first skyscrapers started to erect. The ironic thing, of course, is that Wren's vision was to create just a new London within the boundaries of the wall itself, but in fact his legacy still affects modern day London massively because of this. This is the sightlines that have been controlled by access to St Paul's Cathedral. So although he only intended to rebuild the central west city of London, he still controls how you can build all the way these different visionary routes along modern day London are completely dictated, including things like the cheese grater that's on an angle to allow people to see through to the cathedral. And that's why his legacy still persists. This genius, Wren, 300 years this year, his anniversary of his death. And as I said, he still dictates modern London through the control of access to St Paul's Cathedral. So a little potted history about Christopher Wren here. One more thing to say is I have this book that I bought last year. It is, as you can read, it is a parliamentary inquiry into the causes of the Great Fire of London. And it goes through, it's full of, this is genuine 1667. It's full of interviews with people who confessed to putting the fire, or they saw their neighbours acting suspiciously. I'll pause a few pages so you can read them yourself if you want to pause it. Absolutely fascinating document here, including the very last page is a confession that was found inside a letter that had been left in a church. If I can get it open without ripping the very delicate pages here, have a look at this. And it's brilliant. So there we go. So Christopher Wren, as I said, he wanted to create a new London like this, but he was managed to destroy his plans, but he rebuilt London that controlled skylines to St Paul's even now.
Stand the victorious, happy and glorious, come to reign over us, God save the Queen.
Guess what's happening in Dulwich Park today? Well, these horses give you a clue and a uniform they're wearing. So it's happening on Saturday, might be connected to this. Well, this is all actually an Uber-inspired event. At 1 o'clock today, in about half an hour, people can queue up here on the red carpet, another clue, and tap on the Uber app, which will be here, to become part of a special ride around Dulwich Park. Another clue here, and this gentleman he's a super fan, so he's going to be first in the queue, I suspect. Basically, this carriage you see here, it is the same carriage that is used to stand in for the royal carriage in The Crown. And Uber have hired it today. All money from it will be given to Spanner, the animal charity, SPANA, who I have worked for. And look at this carriage. It is the one that's used, as I said, in The Crown. It's the closest replica you can get to the royal carriage. And they're going to pass it around the park today between 1 and 3 to obviously make you aware of what you can get through Uber, but also just to give people a fantastic experience of getting as close as you can to the royal ride that's going to happen with the king in his air-conditioned carriage this Saturday. Just look at this fantastic detail event, and I just can't wait. I'm going to try and get in it myself if I can. And I assume you're going to be in the queue to get into the ride today?
We're queuing over here too.
Excellent. What's your name, by the way?
Andrew.
Hello, Andrew. I'm David. And I've just recorded this. If you don't mind, I can put you on TikTok because I
better do what you like.
We are first in the queue to ride in the royal carriage. This is the same carriage that's been used in The Crown, and today it's been hired by Uber, which I'd like to thank them very much for the opportunity. We're in Dulwich Park here. 4 lovely horses here with the rider at the front dressed up properly. And this is the replica of the gold carriage, 270-year-old carriage that will be ridden not by Charles to get to the Abbey, because he's driving in the Jubilee coach and the air-conditioned modern version. This is the coach that was described by the Queen, God bless her, as horrible because of its conditioning. So I'm hoping we don't get too bumpy a ride today. However, I'm sure that it's going to be absolutely fine, and I just can't wait. To capture the king's attention, Christopher Wren, the brilliant architect after the Great Fire of London, made this scale model, 1 in 25, of what he wanted St Paul's Cathedral to look like. Now, it does have a superficial resemblance to what eventually came of it, but in reality, it's quite different. However, it was designed that you could actually go underneath it, put your head up inside and look at what the interior was. And it did include originally sort of stone colours with grey for the lead of the domes, gilded details and all sorts of interior designs. And it's a perfect model with all architectural details included in it. It's not really exactly how the model of the church looks like now in many cases, but it cost about the price of a full house in London back in 1673 to 74. It's 6.5 metres long, 3.5 metres wide, and more than 4 metres tall, making it one of the tallest, largest models in the country. And it was designed really also not just to show the king what the cathedral would look like with its 3 domes, as you can see here, but also if something were to happen to Christopher Wren, then we would at least have the model to use to make it after he passed away. Luckily, he lived well beyond the cathedral being built, and about 11 years afterwards he died. This is also the... So Samuel Pepys sneaked into Westminster Abbey for the coronation of Charles II at 4 o'clock in the morning. This is from his diary, 1661, April the 29th. And while I'm watching the coronation, I think I'll tell you about what happened when he sneaks in. So he had a friend who was the master of the king's works who allowed him into the abbey early at 4 o'clock in the morning. He had to wait till 11 before the king arrived. And he basically says part of the ceremony, he was right stuck at the back, so he couldn't see much. But the king's arms went to the 3 open spaces and declared 3 times, if anyone could show any reason why Charles Stuart should not be King of England, he should now come and speak. A bit like a wedding then, but no one dared speak, of course. There was a pardon of many people. Then these famous medals were thrown into the audience for people to catch. Again, he tried but couldn't get one. And eventually, as it says here, look at this. It is. But I had so great a list to piss that I went out a little while before the king had done all his ceremonies and went round the abbey to Westminster Hall. So he missed a lot of the occasion, and he claimed that he couldn't hear because too many people were there and the music, etc. Then afterwards he went out on the lash with his mates. And again, you can see here, we drank the king's health and nothing else, till one of the gentlemen fell down stark drunk and lay there spewing. And I went to the Lords pretty well, but no sooner in bed, but now I would begin to vomit. And if ever I was foxed, it was now, which I cannot say it because I fell asleep and sleep till morning only. When I waked, I found myself wet with my spewing. So clearly he enjoyed himself at the king's coronation back in April 1661. I don't think I'm going to do that tonight myself, but there you go. Anyway, this is what's happening. No one knew what was just about to happen in royal history because this is 1935 and this is the king at the time, King George V. He was going to die within a few months of this, and his brother, Edward VIII, was due to take over. But as we all know, Edward abdicated because he loved a divorced American woman, and he chose love against the crown, which meant that his brother here, George VI, suddenly, surprisingly became king instead. This is the Queen Mother, which meant that this little girl here, who uniquely in the whole picture, along with her uncle, is staring out at the picture. This was the young Princess Elizabeth. So she was then going to become, surprisingly, unexpectedly, the heir and future queen. This is her little sister, Margaret. But as I said, when this picture was painted, no one had a clue the astonishing shockwaves that were due to happen in the history of the royal family. This painting was made in 1936 by a man called Frank Salisbury, and it shows the west door of St Paul's Cathedral on what's called as Jubilee Day that year. But like I said, astonishing how lifelike the person who was due to become queen looks in this painting, and they had no idea what was going to happen to her. I'll tell you one famous London venue that's definitely not changing its name, and that is the Prince Charles Cinema, famous for their what's it called? Well, unusual sort of cultish films. And as you can say here, no, we are not changing our name. Good for them. This is it. We're riding the royal carriage. Look at this. This is the same view that Charles and Camilla were going to get. Not quite as many fans outside today, unfortunately, but never mind. I'm going to practice my royal wave here. There we go. Look at that. Can't get my hand out the window, however. And we've got a royal fan here, Andrew. Hello, Andrew. And look at that. Unbelievable. This is, and look at the people coming. So this is a replica of the royal carriage that will be used by the king to take himself back from Westminster Abbey to Buckingham Palace this Saturday, May the 6th. Isn't it absolutely fantastic? And we're here due to, I must thank Uber for allowing us to book this carriage free of charge. All the proceeds from it are going to go to the animal charity SPANA, Spana. And here we go. Oh gosh. Well, that was a lovely day to be riding in a royal carriage. Everyone's having fun, and we're the first to be taking a ride today. I can't show you the ornate exterior of it, but just to say this is what Charles and Camilla will be looking at themselves as well. There's a cameraman recording us. I'm in the camera as well. Okay, that's it. I'm going to sit back and enjoy the ride now. What a glorious thing to do on a bank holiday weekend. Come down with your dog to explore the Dorset coastline. Isn't this a fantastic place to be? Hey Frankie, get away from that cliff. Come on, Frankie, come here. Good boy. Let's go have a cup of tea. Come full circle. Exactly 50 years ago this year, this bench was put up and it says Coronation 1953. How poignant. And we're in the tiny little village here of Chilfrome in Dorset. There's a very poignant memorial in this beautifully restored 13th century but rebuilt by the Victorians church to the 17th century vicar here, Thomas Clement. If you inquire who lies within this frame, one much more clement by his life than his name, a painful pastor that with Christ did gather, a loving husband and a tender father. Thomas Clement, 1675, according to this memorial here, but there's a very sad neighbouring one. His poor son. Here lies the body of Thomas, the son of Thomas Clement and rector, and Hester, his wife, who died the 26th of October 1676, aged 6. So just a year after his father died, the poor 6-year-old boy died. What a beautiful, poignant memorial. What a lovely church. These chairs are witnesses to history. Let me explain how. They were in Westminster Abbey in June 1953 for the Queen's coronation, because my brother-in-law is an architectural salvager and he bought these from Westminster Abbey about 20 years ago, he says. He's got the receipt and photographs of them inside the Abbey at the time. I don't know how long they would have been there. They look like maybe early 20th century, and there's no marking on them, but you can tell they used to belong to a church because they've got the tray at the back for the Bibles or the hymn books to be on, and they've also got down here the hooks from which you would hang your prayer cushion. I think a hassock, they're called. But anyway, what a remarkable thing to feel. So who famously may well have sat on these chairs for the Westminster Abbey procession? I'm going to join them now. Maybe Winston Churchill, maybe famous people from the world of arts and literature. But anyway, these are original Westminster Abbey chairs that witnessed the historic coronation of Queen Elizabeth II in June 1953. Expelliarmus! I'm a Harry Potter tour guide, the London Spy, and this is a famous scene from the first film. We are in Leadenhall Market, and this is where Hagrid takes Harry, walks him through these amazing Victorian, sorry about the building works here, Victorian streets. Around the corner here, he says, I've got to get you the things you need to have your first term at Hogwarts. We're going to take you to the bank, and we're going to do some shopping. So they turn the corner here, and they walk up towards this white doorway, which is painted black in the film, and it's there that it is the entrance to the leaky cauldron, through which they tap some bricks and then it becomes Diagon Alley. Now, one thing that makes my Harry Potter tours different from any other is the magic, because I'm also a member of the Magic Circle, and I have some extremely interesting objects that I share with people on my tours too, as I fumble inside my bag and try and find the special thing I want to share with you today, which is this here. So this, which is what I show on my tours. Okay, it's my version, my copy of the book. Unfortunately, this version of the book is a little bit faulty, because if you look at the back of it, can you see here, it says Philosopher's Stone. Bit of a misprint, which means it's not worth very much money. And also on page 53, I think it is, as well. Here it is. Look at this. It says one wand twice. Another spelling mistake, which just makes this a rather cheap version of the book, because it's obviously got lots of mistakes in it. If you believe that, you believe anything, because what this really means is that this is a genuine first edition, first impression of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, which for those select people who do come on my tours, I actually sometimes bring out with me if it's not rainy and let them see it. And this statue marks the centre of London, the point from which all distances marked on your eye maps or whatever you use to get into London is calculated. It's a very historic spot. It's also the place where King Charles II avenged the murderers, the regicides of his father Charles I. He hunted them down. They were dragged to this spot and cruelly executed by being hung, drawn and quartered. The death knell for those who had dared to kill the king. Queen Victoria's coronation left her in agony. Why? Because the Archbishop of Canterbury pushed her coronation ring onto the wrong finger. It didn't fit. She was screaming. She had to have her hand bathed in ice water to try and remove it. Later on, she left the abbey, thought it was all over. They had to be called back in again because the other bishop of Bath and Wells had turned over 2 pages by mistake in the order of service, and they'd actually left out the whole section in which she officially became the Queen. She actually wrote in her diary that the Archbishop of Canterbury was so confused and puzzled that he knew nothing. It lasted 5 hours altogether. 400,000 people had crowded into London, almost overwhelming it to watch the procession to Buckingham Palace and back again. And then the final thing was one of the lords, the ancient and feeble Lord Roll, was climbing up the stairs to touch her crown with all the other rolls. He fell over and rolled down the stairs, had to be lifted up again and fell down again. But as I said, she lived a long and happy life. But this was an absolutely disastrous coronation. It wasn't even practiced. This is the smallest sculpture in London. Just look up here. Can you see? There's a nose here. What does it represent? It's meant to represent nosy Parkers, people spying on people. It was designed by an artist called Rick Buckley. Originally there were 35 or so of these noses all around London. Only about 10 of them survived, and I think they are, this one people say is meant to represent Napoleon. I don't think that's true, but anyway, these are the smallest sculptures in London, allegedly. And the noses, there's another one in Mead Street in Soho. Buckingham Palace is on the end of the street. This is Admiralty Arch, and as I said, this is the noses of London. This amazing late Victorian building is the headquarters of the former Prudential Insurance Company, designed by Alfred Waterhouse in the 1890s. It's absolutely fabulous, full of history. One thing about it is that Charles Dickens lived on this site before it became what it is now. There's a statue to him here. He says that he wrote the Pickwick Papers here in 1836. This rather strange structure in the middle hides the view inside of the staff restaurant for the people who live and work here now. As you can see there we go. It's an incredible late Victorian architecture. I don't quite know how to describe it really. This is a statue dedicated to the lives of the staff working for the Prudential Insurance Company who lost their lives in the Great War. And through here is a second set of structures which leads out into the building itself. I just love this building, and yet there's hardly anyone here ever. Look at this wonderful brickwork detail. And here is the second archway running through here. Okay, there's another plaque here dedicated to Charles Dickens as well, up on here. And as I said, this is a Waterhouse family. They also created Price Waterhouse Coopers, and I believe the same architect here also designed the Victoria and Albert Museum up in Kensington as well. As I said, it's free to visit. You can walk through. The original Prudential building had its own chapel, its own library, its own staff restaurant, and had a separate entrance for women and men. I'm not quite sure why. Perhaps the men couldn't be trusted with the women. But it's got sort of a medieval sort of cloisters appearance now, really, and it comes out directly into Holborn. So here you have it, the original Prudential Insurance building. A man was dragged under a car at the end of the street for more than a mile, dying of his wounds 3 hours later. Why? Well, it was the middle of the Second World War, 1944. This had a jeweller's shop just here, and two men used their axe to smash the window and grabbed a tray of rings worth a fortune in those days, £3,500 back then. A retired naval commander just happened to be walking past at the time, Captain Binney, and he attempted to arrest them. They ran off, he chased, they got into a car. He was caught under the car and dragged for over London Bridge across to Tooley Street, where he then died of his wounds 3 hours later. The two men were eventually arrested, and one received a long sentence, the other was sentenced to death, but was given a respite an hour before his proposed execution. In memory of the braveness of Captain Binney, a medal has been created which is awarded to people who have shown exceptional bravery. Since then, more than 50 have been given, and it's given to anybody who is not a Met Police officer, but within the Met area shows bravery in upholding law and order. I want to share not one but two examples of incredible ancient, well, one ancient and one more modern architecture in London. This is a Tudor survivor, a Tudor framed building called Staple Inn. We are in Holborn at the junction. The dragons mark the boundary between the City of London and Westminster, or Camden rather in this case. So Staple Inn, it's been damaged in the war, but it's still essentially, at least its framed front, is Tudor survival, 1585, which is the time of Queen Elizabeth I. Over the road, the next building is an astonishing Gothic revival building dating from the 1890s. It's the headquarters, it's called Holborn Bars, and it was designed as the headquarters for the Prudential Insurance Company, designed by a man called Alfred Waterhouse, who also designed the Victoria and Albert Museum. His family were involved in the creation of Price Waterhouse Coopers, and it's again another astonishing building along Holborn. It's a terracotta sort of brick design. As I said, his architectural style was a sort of a late, very late Gothic revival. The detail along this band of terracotta details, I think it's actually insurance companies. I'm not sure which ones they represent. You've got the sort of the sheep here, and you've got what's it look like, a pot, a crown, a rose. And the other last. Look at this bench, commissioned in the mid-90s, I think, and what it shows is, well, this is the ancient City of London walls, the Roman walls, but next to it we have the London Eye, as well as the Gherkin, so it's juxtaposition, and we have these devils here poking at a devil's pot, burning away, and who's inside the pot? Well, I've been told that this is Margaret Thatcher, this is Rupert Murdoch, Eric Pickles, this is, I think, Boris Johnson, maybe that one is as well, and this is the Governor of the Bank of England. So it's meant to be all the icons of Thatcherite capitalism, etc., boiling away in a hell of their own making in the eyes of the author, who is S. Liptrot. So it's rather surprising that this is commissioned and allowed to be put here, I suppose. But anyway, it's a political sculpture hidden away in the middle of the City of London. And here is the other side, showing the ancient medieval view of what London used to look like. So there we go. And the dragons. About to look at one of the most important, rarest and valuable books in the world. It's just been sold for, I think, £6.25 million. It is Shakespeare's first folio, printed in 1623. So this is the 300th anniversary of it. And this is the very first time that these plays appeared together in the collection. 36 plays, of which 18 were published for the very first time in this edition, so we would never have had All's Well That End Well, Antony and Cleopatra, As You Like It, The Comedy of Errors, Coriolanus, Cymbeline, Henry VI Part 1, Henry VIII, Julius Caesar, King John, Macbeth, Measure for Measure, Damien the Shrew, The Tempest, Stephen of Athens, Twelfth Night, The Two Gentlemen of Rhoda, and The Winter Tale. So half of Shakespeare's plays is the only early text for them. And it was in November 1623. There were around 750 copies printed, of which there are 236 left, sold unbound originally in St Paul's Churchyard. And this particular binding dates from around 1690. And this particular book, as it says, you can read all about it here, but it's been sold. You can pause it for yourselves and read through yourself and read all about it. But I feel so privileged. There is a guard here. I'll show his body, not his face. And basically, this is like touched by genius. Absolutely incredible. The greatest book in the English language. And it's on sale. It's been sold, so I felt I was too late to buy it myself. But there you go, maybe next time. This was the original design for the London Underground map, created by an electrical draftsman called Beck. Harry Beck in 1933. So instead of trying to create a spatial relationship that included the distances between tube stations, his brilliant idea was to instead make it a programmatical version based on a fuse diagram. So as you can see here, the links between the stations don't represent the distances. It's all about the relationship with them, including the junctions, the intersections, and how best to travel to reach your journey by making the correct changeovers as well. And these are actually hand annotated by him himself, including his changes slightly smaller to the stations, and they can be bought from Daniel Crouch, the booksellers, for £50,000. It's just exceptional. They've also got at the bottom of the case a couple of extra layouts when he was trying to work out the Victoria extension, I've been told, apparently. Also how to represent the multiple crosses, such as the four different stations at King's Cross, for example. So this is a really historical and a trailblazing explanation of the spatial relationships between transport links, which I think revolutionised the whole way in which transport was depicted globally. And it was all due to a man whose background was electronics, a draftsman, realising that he should actually create a plug diagram to represent London Underground. Just walking to work this morning, I love my work. So we've got here the Lloyd's building, designed by Richard Rogers. Next to it, the nickname to Willis building, its actual nickname is the Prawn because of the segmented sections in it. Then by the famous architect Kern Pedersen. We've got the Scalpel because of the blade at the top. Then we have the fire survivor, St Andrew Undershaft. There used to be a maypole in front of it around which people would dance and celebrate. Torn down, burnt by the Puritans in the 1640s because it was not pagan rather they thought it was. Obviously the famous Gherkin, the Swiss Ray building, 30 St Mary Axe. And this, look at the angle of this. This is called the cheese grater. And the angle is because of St Paul's Cathedral. It's bent to ensure that there are sight lines from the far east of the City of London. And this is also another Richard Rogers building, as you can see here by the multicoloured external sections of it as well. Up there we got the towering, what's it called, 20 Bishopsgate. We've got the amazing Tudor medieval survivor of St Helen Bishopsgate here, which is full of sort of objects from other churches. It's a bit like the Westminster Abbey of the City of London. And then in the distance, you might just be able to make out behind this tree at the top. At the top of the tree, there is a golden beaver. And the beaver is there because that's on the headquarters of the Leather Settlers Company, but it used to be the headquarters of the Hudson Bay Company. So that's an ancient reminder of all sorts of history in the city of London. Here's another fantastic view of the Gherkin, which is often obscured because tall buildings have been built around it. It doesn't have protected sightlines like somewhere like St Paul's does nowadays. And finally we have this unusual tree here, which is part of what's called Sculpture in the City. It's an annual art event where art objects are brought around to different places in the city. This is the map showing where they all are, and you can walk the route, and this particular item is described here, so you can pause it and read it yourselves. Come with me under Tower Bridge. First thing is, it's not as old as it looks. It's actually only built about 130 years ago, but it was deliberately designed to look old because it's right next to the Tower of London. Secondly, lots of people claim that the Americans were tricked into buying the next door bridge list, London Bridge, back in 1973, because they thought this is what they were being advertised. Completely untrue. They knew exactly what they were buying, and they've made a massive fortune out of it in Lake Havasu, Arizona. Thirdly, it's not a drawbridge. It's actually got teetering sections on it, like a seesaw. They're called bascules, and they're powered until 1976. They were actually powered by steam to open and close. The most times in any one day it's opened is 64. My special cruise boat was commissioned to drive under it for the tour guide group. I was actually taking you through it yesterday as well. The glass floors at the top, you might remember from the Spider-Man film Far From Home. That's the final battle is between Spider-Man and what's his face, can't remember his name now. Secondly, it used to be brown. And other films that have shown this particular view, well, first of all, there was a John Wayne film called Brannigan, where the stunt driver allegedly actually was meant to stop before the end, but he actually jumped over. Then the Spice Girls in their Spice Girls, the movie, they jumped over the bridge, their tour bus, it was shown. Come with me under Tower Bridge, not London Bridge. The Americans, it is alleged, thought they were buying this when they bought London Bridge in 1973, completely true. They knew exactly what they were buying. This is designed to look much older than it really is. It's about 130 years old. It was made to look deliberately old because it's right next to the Tower of London. Public competition to build it. And the bascules, they're called, these raised sections are actually teetering like a seesaw, so there's not a drawbridge as such. And the glass at the top was the final scene from the Spider-Man film. These bollards are called Clink, named after the famous Clink prison, from which the phrase "in the clink" was derived. But this street hides something even scarier that I've just noticed walking down here. So the street is called Keppel Row, and the word Keppel we think is an ancient word that means a cape. And basically when Southwark Council did this street up, they commissioned a sort of an artist called Marianne Grolmus, who specialises in taking unusual objects and changing them to something completely different. And he put up here something really scary, which I've just pointed out to a couple of office staff here who are a bit frightened by it. Look up here. Oh my God. It's a hooded figure, a cowled monk-like cape object surveying the street. Maybe there's a camera inside it, who knows. But anyway, it was commissioned by Southwark Council. It's right next to the CBRE office, for whom I'm doing a tour later today. I just came down here and suddenly noticed this. So there you go. Look out for Marianne Grolmus's caped figure in Keppel Street, with the Clink Prison Memorial at the other end. I'm sitting in the Coronation chair. How come? Given that it's behind security in Westminster Abbey, that's because this is a copy of that chair. We are in the Globe Theatre, and this particular model was created for a production of Richard II, and then also for Henry VIII earlier last year. And yeah, you can sit in it. Now, there are some amazing things also inside the Globe Theatre. Look at this. This is another copy of the First Folio. I saw a video, I took a TikTok of one last week on Saturday, but this is another copy. This is called the Monroe First Folio. And they keep changing the pages every few days. So there are around 230 or so copies of it still around. And the interesting thing about them is that they all differ from each other. They're not all the same. So there are all sorts of textual differences in them and pagination, etc., etc. And the last one sold for £6.25 million at the show on the weekend. And then finally we have here an amazingly elaborate costume designed for the Royal Gala opening of the Globe Theatre in 1997, as worn by Jane Laportaire. And it's meant to be based on the portraits of Elizabeth I. Now, of course, they didn't have Velcro or press studs or zips in 1597 when it was based, and it took 2 hours to apply just the dress itself to the actor Jane Laportaire when she put it on. It took another similar 90 minutes to actually put on the makeup and her bold cap and the wig as well. So there are in this over 1,400 individual pearls sewn on. So the base underneath it, you can see just here, there's a linen shift just visible. Then there's a corset stiffened with reeds, not whalebone, with reeds to shape and control her figure. They've got the sleeves have cane frames inside them to give a rounded shape. And then the open robe, which you can see here, around the shoulders, absolutely stunning, which is pinned to the front and the skirt with 20 gold brooches. It's laced at the shoulders, you can see here. And finally, we've got the ruff. So this is a stiffened linen and lace ruff. It's pinned onto the neck of the robe. And finally, the jewellery, which is based on portraits of the Queen with existing Tudor pieces, is added. And finally, the hat is pinned securely to the wig. And once you've got that, everything is perfect. So at the Globe, we've got Queen Elizabeth, we've got the first folio, and finally we've got the coronation chair. So this man had the weirdest name in history. His name was Nicholas Barbon. The middle name will come in a minute. Basically, he was born the son of a MP who was a fifth monarchist, a radical Puritan MP in the time of Oliver Cromwell. And he went on to become a rapacious landlord, but also building houses between the city and Westminster, but disregarding all planning regulations, really Rachmanist sort of a money-grabbing man. Famous economist as well. However, his first name was Nicholas, his second name was Barbon, shortened to Bare Bones, because his father ran the parliament called the Bare Bones Parliament. But his middle name was, "If Jesus Christ hadst not died for thee, thou wouldst be damned." So how about that for the most bizarre name ever? So we are in the City of London, we are in Devonshire Square, and I'm doing a tour here tomorrow for the Can of Ham building over here at 70 St Mary Axe. And Nicholas Barbon, if Jesus Christ hadst not died for thee, thou wouldst be damned. Barbon is ennobled here. This 500-year-old, exceptionally valuable printed document was printed on this site here at Westminster Abbey in 1482 by a man called William Caxton. He brought printing to this country. The first books he made were in 1472. This is just 10 years later, so it's one of the earliest ever printing made in the United Kingdom, and it is in English. So the red sections are what's called rubrication, and they would have been hand lettered in after the main printing was done. So what is it? It's a book called the Polychronicon, and it's a history of the world. This section is all about the Emperor Julian. who, as it says here, says the apostate, because he converted back from Christianity to paganism. Very interesting turn of events. As it said, it was exactly where the gift shop is now, is where William Caxton set up his press. And this is quite rude, actually. So the story in here is all about after he converted back to paganism, he disrespected Christianity. So let's turn it over and I'll show you what it says. If you read this, it says here, okay, look at the third red line down. It says, also at Antioch he gathered together the holy vessels and the wares of the altar, and befouled with them the filth of his arse, and anon worms sprang out thereof, and frat him so much that his nether end, that he might never be freed thereof while he was alive. Also his steward pissed upon vessels of the church, and said, lo, in what vessels Mary's son is served. And anon his mouth became his arse, and served afterwards instead of his nether end. So these rather unpleasant punishments were given to Julian and his servant for converting back to paganism from Christianity. As I said, this is an incredibly rare document. I own it, printed in 1482. Single leaves of this are occasionally sold, but the document itself, I think only a couple of books survive at Canterbury Cathedral. And as I said, this is a very, very rare piece of early English printing. Right, so if you want to have your hair cut, sometimes you find surprising things. This is in the middle of the city of London, Nicholson and Griffin. Go down the stairs here. Right, you will not believe what's down inside the basement of this hairdresser's. Okay, there's a slight clue just around the corner here as to what we're going to find. I know it's gone. Used to be a little statue here. Right, walk through here. You can see at the end of here, there's a dark, oh no, that's the statue, they've moved it. Right, I have to turn the light on to see it. This is a section of the largest basilica and forum north of the Alps in the Roman Empire. And it's all that's left of a building site that used to stretch as far as big as Trafalgar Square is now. And you can pause to read it, but essentially this is information about it. Pause here, and pause here. And it was the centre for business and markets in Roman London. And it was formed in about AD 70, rebuilt between 90 and 120. A huge area, and this is all that survives of the Roman Forum. A funny thing happened on the way to the Forum. I had to go via the hairdressers. A spy who worked directly for the Queen, even after being unmasked, lived in this house. Number 30, Palace Court, the Russian embassy is just at the end of the street in Notting Hill. The man's name was Anthony Blunt. He'd been recruited by Burgess in the 30s to become a Russian spy, and he really wanted to be an art historian, but he was told to inveigle himself into the secret services. After the war, he went on to become a professor of art history, eventually managing the Queen's art collection. But he was unmasked as a spy in 1979, forced to be in disgrace, and died in his 70s. But he used to live for a while, at least, in this house, which was a centerpiece for Marxist intellectuals when he lived here. Do you want to see the signature of Queen Elizabeth I? This is an incredible piece of history. Just look at this, bottom right-hand corner. This is her genuine, real, very elaborate signature from 1568. It's a letter. The rest of the letter will be written by a scribe, but her own signature. It's in French. It's at the time when the Huguenots in France had a temporary peace from being persecuted by the French kings, and she was congratulating him on this peace. But as I said, it would have been composed by a clerk. It's from 1568, and this is the seal, the second great seal of Elizabeth I. It was designed very carefully by her to show the nature of her own power at the time, under threat from France, from being attacked by other countries, assassination attempts on Catholics, Spanish aggression. She was middle-aged, she was childless. She wanted to show an image of power, authority, virginity, connecting herself to the Queen, the Virgin Mary. Here she is riding a horse, carrying her orb, carrying a sword in one hand, and around the edge of it is a writing said, Elizabeth, by the grace of God, Queen of England, France, because they claimed French then, and Ireland. And it's crowned and resplendent with a court dress and a ruff, showing her strength and her implicit command of the military. She's riding through a field of roses and lilies, and it's absolutely tremendous. Okay, so back to the signature. So it says at the top, so here are some of the most incredible books I've ever seen for sale in this rare book fair. Peter Harrington, look at this. It's a signed first edition by Roald Dahl of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Another rare edition of Sylvia Plath, The Colossus. A signed edition, £125,000 of the very first James Bond book. Signed to Paul Gallico by Ian Fleming. Another book signed by Ian Fleming as well. A copy of The Bell Jar with a personal inscription by Sylvia Plath's daughter of the text on it. A first edition of Brave New World with the original dust cover. We also have here the very first appearance in print ever of The Wasteland. The fourth item down here, published in 1922, October, before it came out, and again it's snip at £15,000. What else have we got here as well? Look at this. The very, very first appearance of Call Me Ishmael, the Leviathan. Hugest of living creatures in the deep, stretched like a promontory, sleeps or swims, and seems a moving land, and at his gills draws in and out his breath, spouts out a sea. So this is the very, very first edition. Only 500 copies were known of Moby Dick. At the time it was known as The Whale. There's just so much else here. We also have a copy of The Ballad of Reading Gaol, Oscar Wilde's famous story lamenting his imprisonment, printed by a man called Leonard Smithers, a well-known pornography printer actually, in his own time as well, but then again that's a bargain at just under £10,000. I just love these sort of book fairs. We've also got 3 copies of the second, third and fourth folios of Shakespeare's plays as well, and there's just an amazing collection of absolutely wonderful books here. Imagine you're desperately in love, your first passionate infatuation as a teenager, and unfortunately in this case the girl's father forbids you from marrying her, and you become a stalker, obsessed, and you hang around her father's office, the man who denied you the chance to become with the love of your life. Well, that's what happened here to Charles Dickens. So he had fallen in love with a young girl called Maria Beadnell, and as I said, her father stopped him from marrying them. So he would hang around the office where her father worked, number 1 Lombard Street, and we are in the middle of the city of London, right next to the Bank of England, the Royal Exchange, and Bank Station. So years later, he was reading through some of his fan mail and he recognised her handwriting. Oh my God, a chance to get back together with your first love. So he arranged to meet her. Unfortunately, when she met him, he was now very surprised to see how different she was. He described her as being an overweight, foolish, middle-aged woman, quote, toothless, fat, old and ugly. Now in my opinion, if it was true love, those things wouldn't matter anyway. But never mind, that's what happened to him, and this was the scene where he would stalk the love of his life's father in a desperate attempt for him to persuade to marry them again. So there we go, the scene of Charles Dickens' heartbreak here in the middle of the city of London. You're 12 years old, your dad's just been sent to prison for debt, and the parents force you to work in a factory. Well, that's exactly what happened on this site in 1824 to Charles Dickens, the most famous writer of the whole of the Victorian era. And this is where a formative experience happened to him. As it says up here, rather euphemistically said he worked here. Well, it was more slave labour. Now the thing was, he was such a good worker that the factory actually stuck him in the window of the company as well. It was a blacking factory. That meant that he was putting liquid into bottles here, The liquid was used in polishing shoes. It was a horrible black tar substance, also used for polishing kitchen ranges, the famous black. Now, I've got a special item to share with you here from here. Look at this. It says on it, Warren's blacking strand 30, so this is some kind of a symbol, maybe a token that was used for the company. On the other side of it, you've got here an image of how effective. It says the effect of Warren's blacking, London. And you see there's a polished boot here that's got such a reflective surface from the brilliance of the blacking that a cockerel is looking at its own reflection in it, and as fighting cockerels would have done in cockfights, it's pecking at it because it believes it's looking at a rival cock. So here we are. This is the scene of Dickens as a 12-year-old boy, his humiliation. This then turned into a TGIF. Thank God it's Friday, but it closed down during lockdown, but you can still see the symbol of it here. But anyway, this is where Charles Dickens worked as a boy, a formative influence on him. He was incredibly ashamed of it, never admitted it until after his death in a diary he left. But this is the scene of his childhood virtual imprisonment after his father was indeed in prison for becoming bankrupt. And we are just by Covent Garden. I'm David Harry. I am the London Spy. This is London. And please follow me if you like the videos. Click on the links to follow my TikTok and come and see me at one of my tours.